what is the semester project? What are we doing today? Obviously, as you guys saw in the announcement, today is going to be doing HTML and CSS. So the idea of the semester project is to be able to build a fully functioning website. The way that we're going to model our website, sorry, if you don't, Nicole, if you don't just mute your mic. The way that we're going to be modeling our website is that we're going to be making a portfolio website for ourselves where we can add posts about what we're doing, projects that we're making, links over to our GitHub for our projects, a fully dynamic website. So just so that you have an idea of what I'm talking about, I am going to show you guys exactly what I mean. So just give me a second to share my screen. All right. So this is just one working version of my website. Obviously, it's not finished, but it's a fully functioning website. So if we come up here, we have a hidden route where we can log in, and obviously we're the only person that can log in. Just give me 1 second to type my password in. And when we successfully log in, we're able to add posts to our website. So I can add over a post. Specify the type of project. If I wanted to, I can even upload image files onto a project to be shown. And after I press post, post will be added dynamically to a database and shown on our website, where we can go over and it's all organized properly. And once you click it, it'll have its own unique page that you can show off everything. So the idea of the semester project is to be able to have a website for your portfolio where you can keep adding content. It's not going to be a website that you have to pull down from the web every time you want to make changes. It's going to be something that changes with you, that you can take, and as you're going through as a student or as an employee somewhere, you can keep showing off everything that you're going to be doing. Okay, so that tying back into what we're going to be doing today. Today's going to be the first part of learning how to do this website. So, as with all web development, nothing happens without HTML and CSS. HTML and CSS will be the first part of our semester project. So again, just going over what you can take away from this project a little bit more concisely. Today is going to be focusing on some of the front-end web development, so the HTML and the CSS. But as we go through, there's going to be many different things that you're going to be learning. One is obviously advanced Python techniques. So as we're coding the website, you're going to be picking up more advanced ways to be able to use Python, how we structure Python for projects, in like up to industry standards and web standards. The Flask web framework, which will be handling all of our routing and all the abilities to do anything on the web with our HTML. Designing and using a database with Python that we're going to be using on our website, but of course you can use on any project that you'd like. How to use Git, because every time we make a change, you guys should be committing it to your Git, and all the changes I make will be on Git. How to design projects, and obviously when we come to the end, how to put this on a Linux server and up to the web, right? So just so that you guys again can see quickly the project workflow, this is what we'll be doing throughout the semester. We'll be starting off with the front end, right? Working our way over to the web framework, where we can start to connect making pages like a home page and about page, and start hooking up our HTML and CSS that we made from this week, from next week, and start actually having our website function as a real website. Once we start to finish that, we can come towards designing the databases, hooking the databases up to the website so that all the information that gets passed in can go to the database, and then starting to wrap up our project with any finishing touches and getting it up to industry standards, and eventually coming up to the point where we can deploy it out on the web. So, just a couple standards for everyone for how we'll be conducting the semester project. You guys can, like today, attend live sessions, code along the way, and feel free to raise your hand, ask questions. But obviously, you also have the option that, like all of our other sessions, all the sessions will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. So if you feel like we're going too quickly or you want to learn at your own pace, everything will be uploaded to YouTube, or if you can't attend. And sessions will be as modular as possible. So what we mean by that is that today we're doing HTML and CSS. Say that you have no interest in building this entire portfolio site or getting very complicated with databases and whatnot. You can just attend an HTML and CSS session and take away the knowledge from that. We're going to be trying to structure every single meeting so that you can attend it, get the information that you seek, but you don't feel like you have to be doing the entire project to be there. but for the people that are doing the entire project, it all ties into itself. And aforementioned, after every session, a push will be made available to a public Git repository so that you guys can pull all of my code, so that, you know, if you feel like you weren't interested in some part but you want to come towards another conclusion, or you missed this week and you want to make sure you're all caught up with us, you can pull from our Git repository. So, enough talking. Without any further ado, why don't we get started? To get started with our HTML, it's going to be super simple. So the way that we're going to do it is just creating documents on our desktop for now. I'll show you how we're going to make the perfect project layout in terms of structuring the folders and whatnot. But for today, we're just going to put everything on our desktop and we can move it eventually. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new folder, and I'll call it starting HTML. Obviously, you can call it whatever you'd like. After I make the folder, I'll come pop in here, and I'm just going to make a new, I'll call it text document, but I'm actually going to erase this entire thing, and I'm just going to call it index.html. Right, so I just changed the text document format to HTML. And index is a very common name used for your starting page, right? So if you see, as soon as I made this an HTML document, the Google Chrome icon popped up right over here. If you have Firefox installed, if you have any web browser installed, you're able to open up HTML files right in your web browser. So you actually don't need to install any other software or any sort of IDEs to be able to check out all the different code that you're going to be writing inside your HTML document. You can just open up a web page in Google and keep refreshing that web page, as you'll be seeing today. Okay. So after you've made this index.html file, or whatever you've called it, what you're going to do is I'm going to right click it, and this is the part that we get up to the editor. So we actually need to write the code, right? So there's many different ways that you can write the code. If you're insane, you could write it in Notepad. Obviously Notepad++ has its own built-in features. I would recommend using Atom or Sublime or VS Code, right, which we'll link at the end of the meeting. Use your preferred text editor, right? Or you can use, you know, proprietary HTML file editing software, but I am just going to open it up with Atom. All right, so if I come over here now, right, we'll have a blank HTML file. So how do we start off with an HTML file? Well, we actually have to tell the HTML file that it's an HTML file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say doc type, so exclamation point, doc type, HTML. So now it knows that it's going to be an HTML document. All right. So after we've got that, now we're going to specify the different parts of our code. So the first thing you have to understand about HTML is that it works on something called elements. So HTML is the way that we could structure a web page, how we could display any information and decide where that information is going to go on our web page. So telling the web page where the information is and what type of information it is what elements are. So the first big element that we're going to want to have is just HTML. And it winds up in Atom, it's perfectly like this. If you just type out HTML like that, HTML, and you press enter, it'll get you in the standard structure, right? So for anyone that does not have this available to them and they're using a text editor, I'm just going to go ahead right now and post this inside of the chat for you guys. And you can feel free to copy and paste that. That way you can get a quick entry into where we are right now. Okay. So there's a couple things that we have to look at right now, right? So we have the HTML, right? And as you see, whenever we have an element, it has these little caret braces, these little arrow braces on the side of it. Whenever we open an element, we'll just start off with that, specifying the element, the HTML element. And whenever we're closing one, it's the exact same thing, except we're just going to put a /. That's how it knows that the element is done, right? So there's a couple different elements inside this HTML element, but the one we're going to focus on today is just this body element. Inside of an HTML document, anything that you want shown on your web page, you specify in this body element. So what I'm going to do, just to make it easier, is I'll just give us some space. That way we can isolate this body element. That way there's no confusion. Okay. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to tab into here, and I'm just going to type the first element that's a very popular element that we're going to be using. So why don't I type brace heading 1, right? Heading 1, and then I'll type this is my website. Brace / heading 1, right? Just so that you guys can see how we do that. If you're inside of Atom or anything, obviously it's very easy. If you just type heading 1, you can press enter and it does all of that for you. So that's why I would recommend trying to get a text editor, but it is possible obviously to do this all however you'd like. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, if you now go back to your file, so this index.html file, right? And we open it again, but instead of opening it with your text editor, open it with Google Chrome, right? Let's see the result of what I just got. Obviously, make sure you save inside of your text file, your HTML file. But look, this code that I just wrote to get the heading 1, this is my website, is now on our website. So what I would recommend to you guys is keep this tab open, right? And whenever we make changes, we could save our HTML document and we could just keep refreshing this page to see the changes. All right, so I'm going to pull this to the side now and let's get back to the code. Just 1 second. There we go. Okay. So we created a heading 1, right? So why is it a heading 1? Headings are just basically a way to make a title. So if you're inside of like Microsoft Word and your professor's asking you to make a big research paper and you're writing the title of your research paper at the top, you can kind of think of that as a heading, right? So whenever we want to make headings for our website, that's exactly what we'll specify. And there's many different types of headings. I think there's actually 6 different headings. So if I come over here, right, and I'm just going to copy and paste this line, I'll change this is my website to my name is Vince. But instead of having heading 1, why don't I try heading 3? So I changed both elements in the beginning when I open the element, and when I close it, I changed it to heading 3. I'll save my file with Control S or however you save it. And now let's reload our website. Do you see how it's a bit smaller? So the heading 1 will be the largest heading, and obviously heading 6 will be the smallest heading. So these are ways that you can make headings on your website titles. Okay, so now why don't we get over to one of the most important elements inside of all of HTML, a paragraph, right? If you guys ever want to make paragraph content, if you guys ever want to make paragraph content, it's super simple. We're just going to use the P element. It stands for paragraph, right? And in fact, I'll show you guys right now. In case you're the type of person that really enjoys commenting, that way you don't get confused with anything, you can open up your arrow bracelet, exclamation point, dash dash. This is a paragraph element, dash dash, oops, dash dash, brace. That is how you can actually write comments inside of HTML. They're not incredibly common because everything is kind of very idiomatic inside of HTML, so you should be able to understand, but that's how you can do it if you'd like to. So now that I got my paragraph, why don't I write a bunch of text? So I'm so happy you came to my site. I am about to graduate. Just a bunch of filler text. And if you'd like, right, I can enter. I'll enter again, just to make our code a little bit cleaner. So now we have that. I will save for everything that's inside my paragraph. If I come over and I refresh my page again, we have a little bit of a paragraph, right? So you can see it's not bolded, it's not as large as a heading, right? But it's still incredibly boring. So how could we add, I don't know, changing the color, changing the font style, right? That's where CSS comes in. So what I'm going to do before we touch the CSS is I'm going to start off with, we're going to make a navigation bar today. It's not going to work because obviously we don't have any pages set up, but we're going to make the exact layout for a navigation bar. And then after we're finished with that in the HTML, we'll head over to the CSS and change this entire page to get you guys started on what you would like for your website. So the first thing that I'm going to do, right, is inside of this body. All right, so inside of this body, right, I'll come over here and now I'm going to make a nav, right? It just holds our navigation bar. Super simple. So a navigation bar is going to be like if you've ever seen on any website or you just saw a demo on my website, it's kind of like a bunch of things ordered next to each other, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a list in HTML and have it so that every single page on my website is a member of that list. It sounds complicated, but basically think about it as we're making bullet points for our website, and all those bullet points are going to head over to different pages. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll make a UL, and if you see, it specifies unordered list. It's just a type of list inside of HTML. Now that we have this UL, right, what we can do is actually specify every single list element, list item. So we have our unordered list that contains list items. What I'm going to do now is just say home. Every list, or actually what I'll do is I'll put inside of here an A. Whoops. Home. Like that. So what I'm doing right now, and I'll comment it for all of you guys, is I just made making a list to hold all my pages. After I make that list, every single page will be an item of that list. Why did I put an A inside of here and not just have it as home? Because an A in HTML is called an anchor tag. It lets you link things on side of web pages. So I will leave it as A for now, just like that. I'll come over here and I'm just going to keep doing this exact same procedure. Oh, sorry. You're going to want to include this href. It's not important right now, but it's a member of the A like that, the anchor tag. Okay, so what I'm doing is every single time I want a different page, I'm just going to make a new list item in my list and have it be an anchor so that it's a link. Okay, So I'm just going to copy and paste this a couple times. And instead of it being home, I'll have it maybe be about, an about page, and contact for a contact page. And with that, we can save. And if we come take a look at our website now, we have links at the top that do not head anywhere, right? But we have links at the top with all of our different types of pages. This is what I was trying to explain with a list. If you guys see the bullet points, that is what I meant by an unordered list, just like that. But again, this looks awful. But the one thing we can take away from here before we leave is, if you guys look at the HTML code, I specified my navigation bar, to be on top of my heading. And just on my website, the navigation bar is on top of the heading. In HTML, you layer things on top of where you want them to be, or on bottom of where you want to be. It's very important to have the order of things situated where you'd like. So I'll give everyone a moment to kind of review just the code that I did, and then we'll head over into starting CSS. All right. So, getting started on the CSS is understanding what CSS is. So, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. So, the HTML is kind of like the information of a web page. The CSS is kind of like its clothing. It's all the pretty design parts of the HTML. So the HTML is going to be everything you want to lay out, and then you add the CSS to actually design that HTML in however you'd like, right? So they work hand in hand, and I'll show you just how we're going to do that. So I'm going to come out of here, and I'm going to go back into this folder, right, on my desktop, where I have my HTML file that we've been working with this entire time. Now I'm going to make basically a new file. I'm just going to modify a text document, and I'm going to call it main.css. Right? Main is a very common file name for a CSS, but of course you can name it whatever you'd like. Just like that. And now we have our CSS file. I'll go ahead and I'll open that with Atom as well. Now we have a completely blank CSS file. So how does this work? What are we doing? So the idea of what we want to do is wherever we have some part of HTML, some element on our page, whether it's the navigation bar, whether it's the heading 1, a paragraph, what our job is in the CSS file is to target that element and tell it what we want to design it with. So why don't we do exactly that? Why don't we make this heading 1 be red and have a bigger font size? So I'll come over into my CSS, right? And the first thing I'll say is the element that I want to target. So this is a heading 1. So I come over here and I'll say heading 1. Open up my curly brackets like that. And now I'll type color is color colon, and why don't I just choose red, right? Now, you can use hexadecimal colors for this, RGB colors, right? I'm just going to stick with the very simple colors, but as we are going through the semester project, of course, we're not going to be sticking with the simple red, white, green, blue, but all the Roy G. Biv names are available to you built into CSS. So I'll change the color to red, and I'll change the font size to, I don't know, 32 pixels. Or we'll do 40 pixels, like that. I'll save. I'll head over to my website, refresh, and nothing happens, right? Well, we never specified that we're even using the CSS on the website. So we have to go ahead right now and tell the website exactly that we're using it. Okay. So I'll come back to my HTML file, right? And just like I said, everything inside the body is what we want seen on the web page, right? It's in between this body element. We don't want to see the CSS file being loaded in. So we come up to this head. I'll come after my title, right? And I'll go ahead and type link. Now, I'm leaving this up here for anyone that is, trying to type inside of a text editor right now, but right now we're going to be linking over our CSS, right? So this href is going to be the reference towards it. So I'm going to erase everything inside of here. And we named our file main.css, and it's inside of the same folder. So I'll go ahead and just tell it, go look for main.css. We tell it it's a style sheet because you can link many different types of things inside of an HTML document like JavaScript. So we tell it it's a style sheet. We link it based on its name or its location if you have it in a different file. And I'll save. Now, if I head over to my website, it's red and it's in 40 pixel font size. So that's a way now that we can start to modify our entire website. So what I would recommend trying to play around with is we have a paragraph, right? Try to take a second to see if you can target that paragraph and make it blue and change its font size. Something fun I'll show you guys is you can actually say font style, and you can make it italic. But this is the basic way that we're lining up a CSS sheet. It's just going to be the exact thing, the data element that we want to specify, and then the value for that. So I say, I want to change the color of the heading 1, and then we tell it the value. I want to change the font size, and then the value, right? So what we'll head over now into, after I give you guys a second to look at this, and if anyone needs me to pull over how to link it again, you can let me know in the chat or speak up with the microphone. I'll give you guys a second, and then we're going to go ahead and to making our navigation bar. While I have this pulled up side to side, and I hope this isn't too confusing, I just have my HTML document on the left side, and I have my CSS on the right side, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take, and I really prefer to have it left and right, or because I can take a look at exactly what's happening inside of the HTML and then reference it over in the CSS. Okay, so what do we want to do right now, right? We have a couple things. We want to make a navigation bar, but if we take a look at exactly how our website is designed right now with the navigation bar, right? It doesn't look too good. It just looks like a bullet list of a bunch of small little letters. We want to change the color of it. We want it to be at the top of our website, right? We're going to make a horizontal navigation bar, but there are many different types, and I'll send over an article as well with the materials. So how are we going to do that? Well, we have a couple different things that we're going to want to focus on, and it is a bit advanced for the CSS, but just bear with me and I'll try to explain it to you guys along the way. And please feel free to ask questions. Okay, so if we take a look first at the layout of this HTML, we're going to start focusing on the bigger elements first, because whatever style inside of the CSS we tell an element to have, all of the child elements, all of the elements inside of that element will also get that style. It's a really great way to go about coding because it could save us a lot of time, because we can encapsulate something and specify a style and everything inside of it will get that style. So we don't have to keep going through and telling every single little bit to get that style. So we'll start off, and I'm just going to focus on this UL over here. Okay. In fact, I'll even delete this nav to make it just as much, a little bit more simpler. So I just have UL, and it'll result in the exact same thing, so don't worry about your code getting messed up. Now, the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to focus on this UL. I like to focus on the biggest elements, so the parent elements first, and then I move over to the smaller ones. So if I come over to my CSS, and I'll make this right here, I'll come over to my CSS, and I'm going to focus on UL first, the unordered list, right? So the first thing I want to get rid of is I do not like those bullet points inside the web page. So I'll tell it the list style type will be none. Right? And I'm not going to refresh my page yet because we have a couple other things to do. But if you want to refresh your page, you will notice that there's going to be no more bullet points. Okay. The next thing that I want to do is I want to turn the margin of the page to 0. Now, as we get further into the semester project, we will be going over more advanced CSS, but there is an idea of if you're going to be laying things around a web page, you have to tell it exactly where they're going to be. So by default, elements on a page will have a margin, meaning that just like if you think about the margin on the side of a piece of paper, it'll be pushed to the left or pushed to the right a bit. If we have a navigation bar, we want it to be all the way to the left and all the way to the right of the top of our page as much as possible. So I want to eliminate that margin. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm also going to eliminate any padding. I wouldn't worry too much about padding. Again, if anyone is interested, they can let me know. But there is much more advanced CSS to learn about the box style way to do CSS. Okay, so I'll turn the margin to 0, and I'll turn the padding to 0. And I'm going to turn this overflow variable to hidden. Now, whenever you're on side of a web page, right, and you're scrolling, and you see things change as you're scrolling, that's the overflow, right? So I'm just going to turn it to hidden because we don't really want anything to happen with that. Again, it's nothing really you have to worry about, but it's just a small thing. And now comes the fun part. Now I'm going to take the background color and I'm going to turn it to something that I'd like, right? So if you guys want to take a second, I'm going to send you guys over a link right now to a HTML color coder, right? Where you can come over and select anything, any color you'd like, and we can start putting it as our navigation bar. So I'll link this right now. Oh, you want to see the href link again? Yeah, sure. 1 second. I just sent out the color code thing for everyone else, but the href link is right over here. Right? So we say style sheet, and the href is just the name of our CSS file. But now, getting back to our background color. So I got my HTML color picker, and why don't I choose like, I don't know, I'll choose like a green. Now, I like working with the hexadecimal values, right? And if you don't know, hexadecimal is after this pound sign, right? It's just easier than doing RGB inside of CSS. So what I'm going to do now is, after I pick my color, I'll come after this hashtag, or the pound sign, and I'll just copy that string of numbers. If I head back over now to my CSS, I'll just write pound, that string of numbers, like that. Okay. So after we do that, right, that background color, go ahead and give your website a refresh. Right? If I refresh mine, we'll see it's a little different now. We don't have those bullet points, we have a background color for everything, and we're all good. If we take a look one more time at the website, we notice that all of these links, right? All those anchor elements are in a weird place. They're like stacked on top of each other. So how are we going to make it so that they can be next to each other instead of stacked on top of each other? That's our next move. So what I'll do is, if I head back, I'm going to start looking on this list item. And after my UL, I'll write list item, bracket, and I'll write float. And if you see, it could be left, right. Float means we want it pushed all the way to the left or pushed all the way to the right. It's a way that we can have things move all the way to the left of something or move all the way to the right. After you change that list item to be float left and we give a refresh, you can notice they're no longer stacked on top of each other. And if you want to see that change one more time, if I erase this, save it and refresh, they were stacked on top of each other. And now they're not. So that was exactly what we're doing. We just want to get rid of that stacking on top of each other feature. All right. Next is, these things are way too close to each other, right? It's impossible to distinguish that they're different links. It almost looks all like one link right now. So how can we make these things push a little bit away from each other, right? All right. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is start working with my anchor, right? We come over here. Our anchors are actually these words, right? Everything, all the words are located between our anchors. So I want to start styling my anchor, right? But here's something to think about, right? Say that underneath my paragraph over here, I have another anchor, and it says a link to my Instagram. All right, so if I come over here, now I have a link to my Instagram at the bottom, right? Well, what if I wanted to change these anchors at the top, but I didn't want to make a change to this anchor at the bottom? Well, there's many different ways that we could target specific data, and I'll show you one more advanced way before we conclude today, but we only want to change the anchors inside of this nav bar, so watch how we could do it. If you see, every single anchor that we want to change is a list item, right? Every anchor we want to make a change to belongs to a list item. Let's check it out. I'll go over this main.css and I'll say every list item anchor, list item space anchor, that's what I want to change. And you'll notice any changes we make will not happen to the Instagram link at the bottom because it's not a list item. If it sounds complicated, you could just do anchor right now, but it's a way to make sure that you don't mess up other anchors on your website. We want to be specific because we're going to have a lot of stuff on our portfolio sites or whatever you decide to make it into. Okay. First thing that I'm going to do is to make it so that those things do not stack right on top of each other, we want to have it turn from being by default, the way that they display is being right after each other. So what I'm going to do is have them display as blocks, which again, you don't have to worry too much about. This is just something that we're going to specify. Okay. Want to have them display as blocks. But also now, we don't want them, maybe I want them to be a little bigger, right? I want them to have a nice bit of padding to them, right? Well, I'm going to do that exactly. I'm going to change the padding. So I'll change it to 14 pixels width by 16 pixel height. Just like that. Now, before we move forward, why don't we give a quick refresh to our page for anyone that's following. Or if I refresh, you guys can see what happened. All of a sudden, I have a little bit of space in between all of them. It's starting to look more like a real navigation bar. Okay. we're just about to conclude with this. What I want to do now is, problem is, just like on a Word document, all the text is going to go all the way to the left of what it's inside of. So what I'm going to say is text align, and if you see left, right, center. I want it right in the center of my thing. So if I refresh again, it's not that noticeable, I guess, because it's not too big of padding, but we should specify that it should be in the center. Not incredibly important, but nonetheless. Okay. Now I'm going to change the color of this thing. I'm going to change it to black. Right? But the important thing is, if you see, the way that these links look right now is like not that pretty. Kind of looks like a Microsoft Word document link with how it has that underline, that purple thing. I don't want it to look like a hyperlink, right? So what I'll do is I'll change the text decoration to none. Kind of like we changed the list style type to none. I'm going to change the decoration of the text because by default, all anchors have a text decoration. If I save that now, you should see. I'll give it a refresh and check it out. Doesn't look like this bottom anchor. That's the text decoration thing we got rid of. And we changed it to black, right? Now we have a navigation bar at the top. Doesn't link to anything yet. In fact, if you click it, you'll see this little hashtag at the end. But we have a fully working navigation bar. Okay? So, one more thing I'm going to add for you guys. Check this out. And this is totally optional, but I think this is really cool and easy to do. What if when we hovered over it, it changed colors so that we know exactly which one we're hovering over? All right. So you see this color green that I chose to be my nav bar? I'm just going to make it a little darker by dragging the thing down. This is totally optional. I'll copy that hex of a little darker, or you can make it a little lighter. And check this out. What is it? Yep. I'll write list item A. We're going to basically copy that. But CSS has special things that it allows us to do. So list item A, list item anchor, on hover. So whenever your mouse is hovering over it. Change the background color to that darker green I just got. So it's going to be, we're basically changing it again, but only when we're hovering it over it. We're going to change the background color. So, give you guys a second to look at that. So, and after you do that hover thing, check this out. You can hover over and you got a little different thing. It's just a nice small feature that you can implement for yourself. And if you notice, right, we specified a list item anchor, so that link to your Instagram did not change like the rest of the stuff that we did. Okay, one last thing to check out right before we conclude is, you see how there, it might be a little difficult to see. Let me zoom in. You see how in this top left-hand corner, there's like this margin that I don't want that to be there. I want my nav bar all the way at the top, right? So what I'll do is I don't know what's causing this problem. So if you're doing web dev, this is a super simple way to figure this out. I'm going to right-click on my page and press inspect. This is kind of like what Faizan went over the other day. And now look, all the HTML you wrote is here on the left-hand or the right-hand side. This is all your HTML. So, like I said, everything on the page that we want displayed is part of this body, right? So if I hover over body, that's everything on the page. Now look at that. This whole white portion, right? When I hover over it, the body, that white portion is orange, right? So I know it has something to do with the body. Like, look, if I hover over the unordered list, it doesn't go over that white portion that I have an issue with in the top left. Nothing does. But when I hover over body, something does. Now, if you look at my mouse cursor, do you see this thing over here where it says margin, border, padding? Now, margin's orange, right? And I hover over my body and we could see that there's orange, right? So I know that the problem I'm having is with the margin of my body. Right? This takes a lot of practice to get used to, and we will be doing a lot of this during the portfolio, like the semester project, but I'm just trying to show you guys a way that to debug your websites, basically. If you have things not lining up the way that you want, this is a way that you can figure it out. So now I know my body's margin is the issue, so I'm going to head out of here, and I'm just going to come to the top of my CSS file, and I'm going to target my body, and I'm going to say margin 0. Okay. And if I refresh my page, there we go. It's all lined up. This is not lined up super well, but just bear with me because we would have to do a little bit more styling and stuff like that, and I will make sure it looks a little better than this, obviously, when we're doing our portfolio website. But we have gotten it to be laid out in the way that our navigation bar is at the top. We can hover over it, and we will hook it up eventually to our semester website. Okay. So again, just so that you guys saw what I did, the body margin is 0. All right. All right. So I hope that everyone was able to follow along with this entirely. I just kind of want to go over something important. What we're going to be doing to make it very simple for you guys throughout the entire design of the semester project is we're going to be using Bootstrap, right? So Bootstrap is a built-in CSS library for HTML. So a lot of this display stuff, margin stuff, padding stuff that you guys might not want to deal with, right, will all be handled by Bootstrap. So if you feel like it might be a little bit intimidating, we will be using Bootstrap to make it a little bit easier, but it is worth knowing how to do some of this stuff. That way, if you ever want to design it from the bottom up yourself, you can. So coming to the next installment of the semester project, we will lay this out better, learn how we can make more advanced CSS and hook it up to Bootstrap, as well as getting it so that we actually have pages. Now, right? So something else I want to mention, so I noticed no one's having questions, is that something we will be focusing on during the semester project, and this goes to all of you cyber majors because I see some of you guys are cyber majors here, is how to properly design your HTML code, right? And how many vulnerabilities there are associated with HTML code. You don't want this thing up on the web and someone being able to get any personal information or passwords from you, right? So I want to have Nicole speak for a second on some of these different vulnerabilities and how they work. So Nicole, go ahead.
Okay, so the vulnerability that Vince was alluding to is the cross-site scripting vulnerability. So in my short presentation, I'm going to be showing how you can protect your website from injection. So what is cross-site scripting and why should it matter? So basically, it is a type of vulnerability commonly found in web applications that makes it possible for attackers to inject malicious code into a victim's web browser while they're on your website. Using this malicious code, the attackers can steal the victim's credentials, such as session cookies. And let's say if you are logged into Twitter, if they steal your cookies, they could actually take over your account and start using your own account, which is something obviously nobody wants. The access control policies employed by browsers today protect those credentials, but they can be bypassed by exploiting this vulnerability. They take advantage of web applications that accept user input without validating it before presenting it back to the user. It must also take the user to input response in order for it to work. And even though it is a widely known attack, the number of websites that are still vulnerable remains large. So how do you securely code your website to avoid this kind of exploitation? And really the best defense against cross-site scripting is to remove or disable any markup that can potentially contain instructions to run the code. And by that, I essentially mean to perform input sanitization. And so basically, as it says right here, it's the process of modifying user data so it can't be used to run scripts or otherwise affect execution of the code. And these kinds of scripts include tags such as script right here, object, embed, and link. And so I'm going to show a quick example of an attack. and a quick example of a defense that you could use. And really, it's super simple. You don't need to have too much knowledge. Basically, what Vince went over today could kind of give you a good idea of how tags go inside each other and how you assign things like that. So in the example I have right here, this is a form written in HTML. So the user right here will submit a form, but let's say if they forget to fill in username, it will output to the user that there was a missing field. So they failed to fill in a required field, and so an error is sent back to them. However, in this example, there is no input sanitization, so the code simply repeats exactly what the user inputted without escaping any characters. If a threat actor knew this, they could exploit it by inserting a malicious script, such as below down here, and the output will work on their behalf. So the script right here to the right, it essentially has a website right here, which is basically like the hacker's domain that they want news to be sent to, that upon launching, the website will take you there, and the threat actor could do things such as spamming you, injecting malware, or worse, if the comment was saved back to a database, it could be seen by other visitors to the website, and their browsers will be tricked into opening the pop-up on the hacker's site. So then, how do you defend against it? And exactly like I said before, you want to make sure that your input is sanitized before it is outputted. So because we are defending against web page injection, you need to escape HTML special characters that execute code. So this includes tag brackets and the ampersand symbol as shown here. So this code right here, simplest line of code, could prevent all this by calling a library that filters all special characters so that they are just run as text without it being executed in any kind of code. And so this is just one vulnerability and one solution. There are many kinds of injection attacks that websites are susceptible to, and other exploits completely outside the realm of injections. As we go through, Vincent, the semester project, we can talk more on these kinds of vulnerabilities. But for the time being, a great resource to check out and keep in the back of your mind is OWASP HTML5 cheat sheet. And so as you could see right here, I just snipped a quick table of context of what it entails, and it's a lot of great free information with very, digestible tips on how to make sure that your coding is preventable from being exploited for a cross-site sifting attack, and it even double dips into some other injection vulnerabilities.